Welcome to Kill the Cat, a filmmaking and screenwriting podcast. In this episode, Kat and I will be discussing the Disney cartoon Phineas and Ferb and how the writers used a strict episodic formula to create an enjoyable, fun show for all ages. Spoilers ahead for one and all episodes of this show, but otherwise, enjoy the episode.
Welcome to this episode of Kill the Cat.
Hey Ibby, I know what we're going to talk about today.
What are we going to talk about today?
We're going to talk about Phineas and Ferb. Hey, where's Perry?
Perry!
He's actually over by Ibby's computer staring at us.
I have a Perry the Platypus toy.
That is amazing.
We found him in an op shop, me and my wife, way back just before we started dating, and he was our child that would get passed between us. We would have custody for a few weeks each, and then I just kind of ended up with him, and now he lives in my office.
That's what you think. What he's actually doing is sneaking out.
Yeah, he never actually spent any time at my wife's house. He just
went to go fight an evil pharmacist.
Yeah. But yes, so today we are talking about Phineas and Ferb, and specifically we're talking about formula. Now, formula is often a bit of a dirty word when you talk about movies and shows. You don't want to be formulaic and unoriginal, and there's plenty of shows and movies that have felt formulaic and unoriginal. And when you repeat the same plot points, when you're hitting the same beats, when you're not growing your characters, you can often have your audiences losing interest because they just feel like there's no point to the show. But Phineas and Ferb managed 4 seasons, 2 movies, and a TV special within a formula that's pretty simple and actually kind of accounts for most of the episode while staying pretty entertaining the whole way through.
Yeah, so we both watched this show as adults, so this isn't like a nostalgic childhood thing.
No.
Although the creators did say that they wrote it for adults and the humor is for adults, so when I heard them say that, I'm like, okay, that's why so many millennials really like this show.
Yeah.
We do a lot of millennial nostalgia, hey?
I don't know why we would ever do that.
But yes, so basically this is a 10-minute kids cartoon that aired on the Disney Channel. Mm-hmm. And with a few exceptions, every episode has essentially the exact same plot with variations.
Yeah, pretty much.
And everyone pretty much is amazing and super entertaining. So we're going to talk today about how this show made something so good and so amazing while hitting the same beats in pretty much every single episode.
Can I throw in a little tidbit for you?
Go for it.
For our audience, I've told you this already. The very first line is there's 104 days of summer vacation. Did you know? So shows used to get signed for 52 episodes, so 2 seasons. For Cartoon Network, Disney, Nickelodeon, it would basically, you got a syndication package of 52 episodes. And for Phineas and Ferb, each episode is actually 2 sub-episodes. And so you ended up with 104 episodes. And each episode took a day for Phineas and Ferb, and that's why it's 104 days of summer vacation.
Other tidbits about this show, it was pitched for about 10 years before Disney Channel picked it up.
They wrote it in the 90s when they were working on Rocko's Modern Life, which Rocko's Modern Life and Phineas and Ferb just feel like generations away from each other. I remember Rocko's Modern Life from when I was 5 or 6.
Yeah.
But yeah, they just feel so separate from each other.
Well, that's the reason no one picked it up. They thought Phineas and Ferb was really weird. They thought it was too complicated for kids to understand, which seems odd now when you watch the episode.
Yeah, because I'm this is quite simple.
Yeah, and it was weird to have 2 main characters who didn't have a problem to solve every episode. So the premise of Phineas and Ferb is it's 2 brothers, and every day they want to make the most of their summer vacation, so they pick some wacky invention or adventure that they're going to have.
Yeah.
They go off, their older sister tries to bust them to their mum, who has no idea this is going on. Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, their pet platypus,
Perry,
Agent P, goes off to fight Dr. Doofenshmirtz, who is a supervillain trying to take over the tri-state area. Which, the first one is oh yeah, that's pretty good. And then the second bit is... Why? Where did that come from?
Arguably the more enjoyable part of the show, the show that has more stakes and I get way more into, is Doofenshmirtz and
same.
Perry. It's so ridiculous.
They're also best friends, which is super cute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so why don't we actually go through the structure of
yes,
it?
That's a good idea.
If you wanted to write your own Phineas and Ferb show, this is how you would do it.
All right, so it begins. Phineas and Ferb are under a tree in their backyard. They're deciding what to do with their day. Phineas will say, "So, Ferb, what do you want to do today?" They chat, something inspires an idea, and Phineas will say, "Ferb, I know what we're going to do today."
Then Phineas and Ferb begin building their latest wacky invention. Their friend Isabella will come over and be like, "What you doing?" And then their older sister Candace will realize that they're up to something and will basically try to figure out what it is and then bust them to their mum.
Meanwhile, the B plot has kicked off, and Perry has snuck off to go to his underground lair, and Phineas will say, "Hey, where's Perry?"
And then Perry will like take a hidden passageway, which is often in the backyard, but if they're ever not in the backyard, there's some wacky, like weird tunnel system that he takes to get to his lair. There's one where they go to Mount Rushmore, and it's like he gets all the way back to the underground lair under the house, and then Doofenshmirtz was at Mount Rushmore, and he has to go all the way back. And Major Monogram's just like, "Yeah, sorry, we could have done that better."
Major Monogram will give him an assignment, so he'll be like, "Dr. Doofenshmirtz is buying up all the thing in the tri-state area. Go and find out what he's up to, Agent P." And then Agent P will get some sort of secret agent style ride. It's different every time, and it goes off to stop Dr. Doofenshmirtz.
Meanwhile, we cut back to the A plot. Phineas and Ferb are having fun with their friends, working on the newest invention. Candace keeps trying to get the mum's attention. Mum's just trying to do something else like shopping or just enjoying the day.
She's usually like, "That's nice, Candace."
Also, Jeremy will potentially be around at this point.
Yes. Sometimes it's Jeremy who's Candace's crush.
Yeah.
Sometimes that's the Candace plot. But same idea. Back to Perry, he'll break into Doofenshmirtz's lair and you get Doofenshmirtz Evil Incorporated.
Perry breaks in. Often Doofenshmirtz has a line that's like, "Ah, Perry the platypus, how unexpected." And by unexpected, I mean completely expected. He'll then trap Perry. It's always a different trap. And then he will monologue about his latest scheme and why he's taken up all the things. And he will unveil his latest Blankinator.
Yes. His mission is always to take over the tri-state area.
Yeah.
Somehow. Sometimes we get backstory, which is always fun.
The one where he goes back to his birth and he was like, there was no one there for his
Neither of his parents showed up for his birth. There's this whole thing of like his dad forced him to be a garden gnome for a while.
Yes. And that's why he takes all the garden gnomes in the tri-state.
So it's that kind of plot. Meanwhile, Phineas and Ferb, they're having fun with their friends, with the newest invention. Candace is still trying to get their mum's attention. This is generally the point in the episode where we get a song and like a music video to go with it.
Yeah.
We get a song every single episode. It's sometimes in a different place, but this is the most like normal part in the formula.
It was like
that song.
4 episodes in, I think they had the episode where they're pop stars for a day.
Yes.
They have their one-hit wonder, and every episode after that has a musical component to it.
I think they got a budget. Because, I rewatched the pilot. I'm like, oh, there's no musical number in this. I'm like, they probably didn't have the budget for that yet while making the pilot.
Yeah, and then Perry will fight with Doofenshmirtz. He will escape and defeat Doofenshmirtz. Cue the "Curse you, Perry the platypus." Candace will then drag their mum home to bust the brothers, and right as she does that, the B plot, whatever the innator is that Perry has just destroyed, will get rid of whatever Phineas and Ferb have just made. So when Candace gets back, it's gone just in time for the mum to not see it.
So Candace is devastated. Their mum invites them in for snacks. Perry comes home and Phineas will say, "Oh, there you are, Perry."
And then Ferb says his one line of the episode.
Again, this sometimes happens in different places, but that's usually where Ferb gets his one line. Cut to credits, and then we generally get a fun credits scene.
Yeah.
That's a very specific formula.
When you're talking about a 10-minute episode, to have that much of the formula planned out, it is incredibly impressive that the show manages to stay entertaining. So Kat, why doesn't this get boring?
Why doesn't this get boring? So I think we were talking about Shutter Island, and which is exactly the same as Phineas and Ferb, obviously.
Totally.
Same audience.
Same genre.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Same level of craftsmanship.
It's Phineas and Ferb with DiCaprio and Ruffalo playing Phineas and Ferb.
Yeah, they just wanted to be... I don't want to ruin that twist for anyone who hasn't seen Shutter Island in hindsight. They wanted to be in a Scorsese movie for a day.
Yeah. Imagine filming a Scorsese movie in a day.
Phineas and Ferb could. Okay. We were talking about, how Shutter Island and doing twists and reveals. And in your research, you came across an article that said people enjoy movies just as much, even when they know the big twist at the end.
Yeah, so I went back and actually looked for that, because I read like an article that was like referring to a study or something, but I went back and looked up. And so there's been a couple of studies that have been done that have basically tested the enjoyment of like different media and different genres when it's both spoiled and unspoiled, and pretty much found that across the board, people have enjoyed things more when it's been spoiled, because they're able to basically engage with the like finding the clues and seeing the clues, because they know more of what they're looking for. And the biggest difference in enjoyment, actually, there was a study that tested genres, and the biggest difference was for mystery films. People enjoyed it way more when they knew what was going to happen, because they could then spend the time like looking for all the clues that led to it.
You're not doing the work of trying to pick up all the exposition. Like, you don't have to turn your brain on for that, because you know it's coming. So even though you know what's going to happen in Phineas and Ferb, it's actually very comforting to sit down and be like, I know what's going to happen. And then the enjoyment comes from not what is going to happen, but how is it going to happen? Yeah.
And like Phineas and Ferb exists in a medium that lends itself well to the formula. Like 10-minute episodes that at the time were being released on Disney Channel. It was the kind of thing where you'd turn on the TV, Phineas and Ferb is on, you'd watch a couple of episodes, and that was it. And you were like, I know what's about to come up. I know that Perry is going to fight with the Doofenshmirtz. I know that Candace is going to get foiled in some ridiculous way. I know the boys are going to be building some contraption. We get to see Isabella coming in and being like, what you doing? And being all cute. You are going to be entertained by it because you know what's coming. And it's just the different flavor of the day of how that's getting to you.
I will say binging this show is not quite as fun.
Yeah, see, I binged it over the last couple of weeks, watching like 4 or 5 episodes a day. I still found it enjoyable.
Oh, good.
I can see how, though, if you were watching like hours and hours of this straight, you would get bored.
Yeah, it was definitely, I got into it when it was, back in the day where you would turn on the TV and flick through channels, when that used to be a thing people did.
What? Imagine not having choice of what you were watching beyond just the channel that you
miss the beginning, you miss it. Oh, the lovely, quick, there's an ad break. Get your snack, go to the bathroom, and run back in time for the show to start up again.
The show's back on. So obviously, formula is something you can do, but there is a question of why would you use a formula? What does it bring? So as we've mentioned, I think it makes it easier for people to enjoy, right? You can come in, you know what to expect from the show. You can also then break the formula, which is, brings a lot more fun to it. It's like hanging out with an old friend, right? You go over to an old friend's house. You don't need to do anything together. You can just hang out together, and it's fun and enjoyable because of the connection you already have with it. You're not having to forge that new sort of thing every time you hang out with them.
Yeah. People like the familiar.
Yeah.
And like you said, just because it's familiar and predictable does not make it boring.
No. Getting to, practically, do we want to talk about, some of the ideas around structure and formula?
Yeah, so your formula and your structure, whichever one you want to pick, I'll go into my favorite examples at the end. It's the foundation for your house. And if you're living in a house, you want the foundation to be solid. You want to know it's not going to fall down, ideally. And usually, Phineas and Ferb does acknowledge its formula. Again, we'll get into that in a sec. But usually, you don't really want that to be noticed. And sometimes, you can go into movies and I can't switch off my script reader brain. I'm like, yep, Act 1 crisis. There's the midpoint. Here we go.
Yeah.
Once you've got your formula down, what people actually notice is your plot and how you've decorated your house. So Phineas and Ferb, even though it's the same formula, it's not the same thing every time. And once you've knotted out, this is the formula, this is the plot, you get to have fun with things like, what are the boys going to invent today? So you can spend your creativity there. You spend your creativity on how is Dr. D going to try and take over the tri-state area today? How is he going to trap Perry? How is the Anata going to take away the boys' invention by the end of the episode?
Yeah.
And that's where the fun and the creativity comes. And then because Phineas and Ferb, this is part of the reason I think people thought it was so weird at the time, we're a lot more used to this now, was because of its meta-ness and it breaks the fourth wall.
Yeah, it knows...
So common today, not super common when they first came up with this.
Totally. The show knows exactly what it is, it knows its formula, it knows what it's doing, and it totally acknowledges and breaks that formula. There's one time where Perry goes to fight Doofenshmirtz, and Doofenshmirtz is cheating on him with another agent. It's Peter the Panda.
No, not Peter the Panda.
And he's got Peter the Panda trapped, and they're like fighting, and Perry's just standing awkwardly, and he's like, this is just awkward. You need to leave, Perry. I'm sorry. And then they go on to like a Dr. Phil kind of show, and there's all the agents and all the evil doctors. And it's like they've broken the formula there. It's no longer about the fight, but it's actually about the fact that they fight every episode.
They know. I had in my notes that the 3 characters who know they're in formula are Perry, Doofenshmirtz, and Candace. They know, like, Candace refers to the mysterious force of the universe quite a bit, that, like, takes away the boy's invention. So even though she tries every episode to get her mum to notice, she's resigned to the fact that likely it won't. And there's bits where, like, Perry comes into the lair and misses the trap. And Doofenshmirtz is like, can you just step? It's just there. Yep. Or there's one where he comes over and, like, Doofenshmirtz hasn't got anything planned. He's like, can you just trap yourself and can we just not do this today?
And then Candace there's a whole episode where like the boys are like, actually, we might not do anything today. And Candace has just said, no, you need to do something because I'm going to watch the thing and see where it goes. And she asks them, she's like, where does it go every time? And they're like, I don't know, it just kind of disappears. And so the whole episode is just them watching a like roller coaster or something to see when it disappears.
And they have one in season 4 where we get to see what Isabella's up to for the day. And her little chihuahua Pinky goes off to fight Professor Pufenplutz. Same formula, it's just with
different characters.
Different characters.
And that's fun. That's a fun way to break the formula. So one of the things I think in terms of like the practicality of using formula is that you do need to formulate your structure and not your plot.
Yes.
And that's, I think, the line, right? Like, if your plot is the same every time, it gets boring real quick. But if you just got a structure that works for your show, then you're just filling in the gaps, as you sort of said. You've got the foundation set for the house and you're just decorating it. One of the things for this is that you actually do need to spend some time working on your formula. And, Phineas and Ferb was conceived in the 90s. So they had like a good 10 years before it was greenlit for any production or for a pilot, before they actually made the show what it was. And that was time where they were working on the formula, tweaking the formula, and figuring out what it was meant to be. So don't forget that. Like, if you do want to go into formula writing, like, make sure you spend the time to figure out the formula.
Yeah, we're not saying this is easy just because they do the same thing every time.
Yeah, they can do the same thing every time because they've put in the time to figuring out a formula that's going to work for them. Do we want to talk a bit about formula? I remember back in film school, like, formula is one of those things. It's like everyone wanted to break the rules. And I think you've mentioned this.
Yeah, this is one of the frustrations when you meet new writers and they'll be like, I don't want to obey the rules. I want to break all the rules. I'm like, breaking rules is fine, but you have to know why you're breaking them and you have to have a reason for breaking them beyond just, I want to be original and different.
I think I've found that in my writing of like limits and boundaries, which is what a formula is, right? It's like, it's giving you the sort of outer bounds of your plot and your structure of like, you can do these things, but we don't go outside of these things. I've found that in songwriting, in script writing, in even writing for D&D, that like having those boundaries in place is going to set you up to write better, to write quicker. I think back to when we had a writers group that we were part of, and, you know, we had like a weekly sort of thing that we would write to. So it was like basically a writing prompt. But that might have been about genre, that might have been around like characters we had to include or a line that we had to include. And those things always brought out more creativity than me just trying to sit there and go, I'm going to write a script today. If I ever sat and said, I'm going to write a script today, I would usually struggle and not find anything. But if I gave myself an hour and I had to write a script based on like a photograph that I was given, I would be writing really quick.
Because you get the prompt. Or like we had one where we tried writing spec scripts.
Yeah.
So you wrote like a Brooklyn Nine-Nine episode. I wrote part of like a Good Place episode, which was also fun.
And those all came to us quite easily because we knew the constraints that we were in. And finding those initial constraints can be really tricky and challenging. And that's why formula writing is so helpful.
One of my favorite things I've ever made was my graduation student film, which is called How to Write a Screenplay. But that was very like, I'm going to film this with what I have. That's how I did a lot of my film projects, my web series Codependent as well. I'm going to write this for the actors and the locations I have.
Yeah.
And I think my work is better when I do that as opposed to just writing whatever and then going to try and make it work in production, which some people do really well, but I just prefer to look at what I have and try and make something with that.
Yeah, totally. I think one of the other benefits to writing with formulas is that like you can actually get a sense of how you write and some of your own strengths and weaknesses in writing. So I'm going to use D&D as an example, but I've written a bunch of like one-shot adventures for when we've had time between sessions or I've just wanted to run something. They often involve goblins being silly. But I have a pretty, like I kind of do the same thing every time. I realized this the last time I wrote a one-shot. I'm like, oh, this is like the same flavor as, like the same structure as every other one-shot I've written. It starts with the players arriving in the location for the thing. I then give them some like challenges, usually in the form of like a set of games or festivals, because I want them to have a chance to learn the characters and how their characters mechanically work before we actually go into like fighting the monster for the episode. They then get given a map or directions to where they need to go. They then fight like one or two challenges on the way, and then they fight the big bad at the end. And then they come back, often to find the place they were in initially in shambles. So the latest adventure we had, they saved Christmas.
We did save Christmas.
And although they didn't save all of Christmas, Christmas has changed.
Santa died.
They didn't save Christmas. But there is now a Queen of Christmas.
Yes. That was super fun. And all those one-shots have been really fun.
But one thing I've noted from my own writing is that I always seem to load the front really heavy. And so in most of my one-shots, I end up running out of time and having to cut a couple of the things I've planned on the back end. And so what that means is that I've slowly over time gotten better at balancing where everything needs to fall within the story. And that's one of the benefits I think writing to formula regularly can give you, is that you start to become aware of your own writing, you start to become aware of what's working and what's not working. So if you're writing a show like Phineas and Ferb, if you've got 10 episodes with the same formula, you're going to really quickly realize which parts of that formula work and which gags aren't working. And you can cut the gags that aren't working.
And this has been around for forever. Like if you think back to the original Sherlock Holmes short stories or Agatha Christie novels, I have never once guessed the ending to an Agatha Christie novel.
Yeah.
Even though she has a pretty standard formula, I've never picked the murderer.
I've never read an Agatha Christie novel, so that shows where I'm at.
This doesn't really fit anywhere in our outline, but I just wanted to call out that all the songs are bops in Phineas and Ferb.
All the songs are bops.
They're so good. Favorites include Busted, which is Candace and Vanessa's song. Oh, by the way, sometimes we get Doofenshmirtz's daughter trying to bust him to her mum.
Yes.
Which is also really fun.
Yeah. And there's a whole episode around Candace actually busting the boys.
Yeah.
And her realizing that she didn't enjoy actually busting them. She enjoyed the sort of chase of trying to bust them.
Yeah, she didn't want to leave the formula.
Yeah.
Yes. She's like, actually, no, I do like doing this every day. She had an identity crisis. And then it was all a dream.
The one time we're okay with that.
One time we're okay with that.
So why don't we quickly talk about takeaways?
Looking into like structures, like you said, it doesn't make your plot or your characters formulaic. It's a foundation for you to work in, and there are so many benefits to picking a formula that works for you. So my top 3, if you don't have a formula you like, K.M. Weiland's book Creating Character Arcs, which gives you a lot of different options. We're going to get into that a little bit later with some Marvel characters. John Truby's 7 Steps and Dan Harmon's Story Circle.
Yeah.
So those 3, I've used all 3 of those. They all really work for me. So if you don't have a formula you like yet, suggest trying out them, seeing which one you like. There's also The Hero's Journey, which is like the classic one.
Yeah.
I think there's been better ones invented since, to be honest. But that could also be one you try. And once you get these, okay, number 1 benefit is when you have a formula, you can write so much faster.
Oh gosh, yeah.
So much faster because you know where you're going to go and you can feel where you are in your story.
Yeah.
And you will actually finish your scripts. So a really common thing I found in film school was like a lot of like our writer friends would start scripts and never finish them. And also, I talked about this in our Paddington episode as well, but learning to be a great screenwriter, you're probably at some point going to end up being a script reader. And that is so important to know structure for.
Yeah.
When you're giving feedback. Again, I talked about this last episode, but people don't want their plot nitpicked.
No.
And feedback on structure is probably the most valuable feedback you can give to someone.
And often the most important. I've found when I've given feedback on short films and that kind of thing, structure tends to be the thing that you have to figure out first, and you have to get done first. If your characters aren't the best in the world, if the story's not the most original in the world, if you get the structure right, it's still going to feel entertaining and still going to feel engaging, and that's ideally the most important thing, right, is to engage your audience.
Audiences can feel when your structure isn't right. They might not always be able to articulate that. They might say it felt slow, it felt rushed. They might say they got bored at one point.
Yeah.
They might say it was weird. That's generally all structure problems. And the good thing is, if you work originally with these formulas, you internalize them. And you don't have to map it out every single time. And I think when screenwriters are like, oh, I don't use formats or whatever, they've internalized the formula they like. They're still using one, they just haven't written it down.
Yeah. And that's a great place to be in when you can internalize it. I think for me, use formula as a way to experiment with knowing your own writing habits and the things you do well and the things that you need to work on. So I'd say actually as a really good writing exercise, try writing 2 formulas, even if it's not a formula you come up with. So we mentioned before that we did a thing where we wrote spec scripts for shows we loved. Try writing an episode for Brooklyn Nine-Nine, or try writing a Phineas and Ferb episode, and use that as a way of I have a structure I know that I'm going to need to fit into, and that's a good way to practice your writing. I had a lot of fun writing a Brooklyn Nine-Nine spec. That was
really
so
good.
Fun. Because the Brooklyn Nine-Nine formula is just to pair off the characters in a different way to the previous episode, and just give a challenge that's going to be specific to those characters, and then use the different stages of whatever they're doing to interlink with the other characters you've paired off with. So I had paired, Jake and Terry, and Amy and Boyle, and I was just finding what's the gag that connects the 2 storylines that are running at the same time.
And it was a good episode.
Yeah, I think what it all comes down to is that formula can actually be really valuable, and so don't be afraid to actually engage with it and to use it. And if you get to a stage where you're writing a show, try and figure out what are the running gags, what are the formulas I can use. They don't have to be as obvious as Phineas and Ferb. They're probably not going to be as obvious. But formula has been around in all genres for so long. Formula is common in horror films. It's common in police procedurals. Reality TV is completely built on formulas. All of these things follow very clear formulas. And if you can learn to spot them and to use them, it'll make you a better writer and probably a more employable writer.
Very true.
Yeah.
Oh, there you are, Perry.
That was our episode on Phineas and Ferb and how to use a formula. If you'd like to keep up to date with the podcast, make sure you click follow or subscribe on whichever platform you're on. And if you have the time, leave us a review or tell a friend. It helps us grow the show and bring you more like our upcoming episodes on A Quiet Place and a very special event we have planned soon. You can find us on Instagram or Facebook, so feel free to drop in and say hi and share your thoughts. Until next time, this has been Kill the Cat.